Hi guys, my name is Tasia. I am the annuals and perennials buyer here at Garland Nursery. Today I'm going to talk to you about ground covers. I'm going to cover 3 different topics. I'm going to cover how to space them in general care for and maintenance. I'm going to talk about ground covers that are good for erosion control, and then I will also touch on ground covers that are good between pavers and tolerate foot traffic. Okay, so first let's talk about general maintenance and spacing of your ground covers. The best time to plant them is in the fall or in the spring. I love planting ground covers in the fall because then we'll start to get rain, which can help get your plants established before they have to go through the hot summer the following year. But because ground covers have been so sparse this year, I was finally able to get a really nice shipment of ground covers in, so I did want to touch on them now. And you can plant them now, you would just have to really make sure that you keep them watered and you don't let them dry out. So one of the biggest questions that people ask us when they have an area they're trying to cover with ground cover is how far apart to space them. We usually recommend about 1.5 feet apart, but what it really comes down to is the closer you plant them, the faster they're going to fill in and the less you're going to have to weed. The further apart you plant them, the more money you'll probably save if it's a big project, but the more you'll have to weed and the longer you'll have to pull weeds until they have grown in together and can shade out the ground in order to suppress weeds. So what I will include in the comments of this is a really nice chart that goes over based on how far apart you want to space your plant. You take that in the square footage of your area. You can do a simple calculation here and figure out how many plants you need instead of trying to guess. So aside from that, when you go to plant your ground covers, first of all, most ground covers are very tough plants and they don't need really good soil. What I would recommend is if you have a lot of clay, I would use something like our soil building conditioner that comes in an orange bag to incorporate at a 1/3 ratio with 2/3 of your native soil as a mixture just to help break up the clay. I would always recommend using Biotone. This is a really nice organic starter fertilizer that you can put in the soil. You kind of sprinkle it in when you plant each plant. So I would definitely recommend using this, and then you're more than welcome to use a liquid feed or root stimulator after planting, but it's not required. So next let's talk about plants that are good for erosion control. So what makes a ground cover good for erosion control is that it grows pretty quickly, and usually what happens as it grows quickly, the branches that touch the ground will re-root back into the ground with most of these plants, which develops a really nice root system which can help you hold in a hillside if you're trying to cover a hillside, but also these plants in general are good for covering a large area. So then I will go through them one by one. I have them lined up here based on their sun to shade preference, and we'll just quickly touch on each of these ground covers. So first up is Hypericum, also known as St. John's wort. This is a nice evergreen ground cover, takes pretty hot sun, wouldn't mind a tiny bit of afternoon shade, also gets cute little yellow flowers. I have Point Reyes Ceanothus here. This is a nice evergreen. It's a little prickly, but it develops really cute blue flowers early in the spring. Again, a nice ground cover that would tolerate pretty hot sun. One of my absolute favorites is Rubus, also known as the creeping raspberry. Has these nice green glossy leaves that actually get a really nice fall color, will turn kind of orangey red in the fall, but the leaves will stay on year round. Also, this plant gets little edible orange berries in the summer that taste pretty good. Next, I have Kinnikinick, which also looks very similar to Cotoneaster here. Both are nice evergreen ground covers. Kinnikinick, I think, has a really nice low growing habit, whereas Cotoneaster will send up some long, tall shoots up here and there. So this one can get a little rangier. One cool thing about this plant is it'll usually flower early summer, and then it'll start developing berries that will usually turn red by fall. Both of these plants are a little too young for that, but again, nice erosion control ground cover, full sun preference. Gallium is another very fast growing ground cover. It'll develop little white flowers that are really cute, and you can see the shape of the leaf on this one is just kind of fun and different and really pretty. Then heading into ground covers that will tolerate a little bit more shade, I have a Juga. This is a very fast spreading, low growing ground cover. It'll develop these purplish blue flowers once a year. And as you can see, you can get them in a lighter colored foliage or in a darker color foliage. So this is really nice winter color. This is a ground cover that can tolerate a little bit more water during the winter. So if you have a semi-wet area you're trying to find a ground cover for, usually a Juga can tolerate that. It doesn't want a lot of it, but it can tolerate it. Then one of our natives to the Pacific Northwest is Salal. This one can get pretty tall. It would prefer shade in the afternoon, although it can tolerate some sun. I think with too much sun, you would see some burning on the leaves. Again, another fast grower. And then one of my favorites for afternoon shade is Pachysandra. There's a green leaf version and a variegated version, and it makes just an absolutely gorgeous carpet on the ground. It usually looks a little weird growing in the containers. It doesn't have the perfect shape, but once you get it in the ground, it's absolutely gorgeous and has really nice evergreen leaves. Again, would prefer afternoon shade. Okay, so finally, let's talk about ground covers that are very low growing, often good to go in between pavers and a walkway or tolerate some foot traffic. Again, I have these arranged in how much sun to shade that they prefer. The first plant that I'll go over is Scotch and Irish moss. So as you can see here, Scotch moss has this bright green foliage, Irish moss has this dark green foliage, and they both have adorable white flowers in the summer. When I plant these, I really love to purchase both of them and alternate them between each other so I get some pops of bright green with some pops of dark green. Another one of my absolute favorites is Creeping Thyme. As you can see here, I have woolly thyme and Thymus coccineus, which is also called red creeping thyme. There's also thyme that has variegated foliage, blooms light pink, blooms in white. So there's quite a variety of options when it comes to thyme. This Thymus coccineus is particularly my favorite because it has these magenta flowers in the summer, and then over the winter, the foliage will actually turn a burgundy color. It's absolutely gorgeous. Then finally, here at the end, I have green carpet. Herniaria is also a name for it. Again, just very tight, tiny green leaves on this plant. Then jump in over here, I have Leptonella. This is a very, very fast, low-growing ground cover. As you can see, they come in a couple different foliage colors. There's also miniature versions. The common name for this plant is brass buttons. But again, grows very fast, tolerates some shade in the afternoon. But just a good plant. And then if you have a shady area, I'd also recommend Baby Tears. This loves afternoon shade because of this nice, super delicate small foliage. Gorgeous in the ground, spreads pretty quickly, a really nice ground cover. And finally, another ground cover that I don't have mentioned here is Blue Star Creeper. I'm hoping to get more of that back in within the next few weeks. There is a light blue, a dark blue, and a white flowering variety, and all of those have a very nice tight green foliage, almost similar to the Baby Tears, but they'll get covered in blue or white flowers during the summer. Also another fast grower. One thing that's really important with all of these ground covers is they're very tight and low growing to the ground. Because they don't grow as tall or as vigorously as the Erosion Control ground covers, they're not as good at suppressing weeds. So keep in mind you will still have some weeds growing up through these ground covers. So if you're going to plant them and you have an area that's already covered in weeds, even if you weed it, there's likely more weeds that are going to blow back in if you plant these that you'll have growing up through them. So keep that in mind when you plant these. And then finally, one last ground cover that doesn't quite fit either category, but I really wanted to mention, is called Veronica. This variety is called Georgia Blue. It gets these little tiny blue flowers, usually very early in the spring. It'll get covered in these flowers. And then again, late summer, you'll see a teeny tiny flush of a few more flowers. What I love about this ground cover is that it is evergreen, and during the winter, its foliage also turns burgundy. So then early in the spring, when it starts flowering, its foliage is often still burgundy. So you get kind of a nice burgundy foliage with a light, bright blue flower on it that will then turn green as the new growth comes out in the summer. Hi guys, again, thank you for watching. Feel free to add any questions in the comments below, and then come stop by Garland and see what ground covers we have in.